Whoa, buddy. Put that thing back in its holster. We haven't gone anywhere.
I don't understand.
Check out the MichaelDukesShow.com for information on how to get access to the podcast.
The Michael Dukes Show.
I have 2 guns, one for each of you.
Firearms Friday.
As Thomas Jefferson stated, it is the right and duty of the people to be at all times armed.
Say hello to my little friend.
I say that the Second Amendment is, in order of importance, the First Amendment. The right to keep and bear arms is the one right that allows rights to exist at all.
The Michael Dukes Show. The right to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed. Not be infringed. Firearms.
From my cold, dead hands.
Friday.
Here's my rifle, this is my gun. This is for fighting, this is for fun.
Firearms Friday.
Firearms Friday. Hello, my friends. Hello. I just called to let you know I see forever in your eye. Wow. I don't know where that came from. A little Neil Diamond for you this morning here. Welcome to the program. It is Friday. That is TGIFF. Thank goodness it's Firearms Friday. We are diving into it, talking about issues of a Second Amendment nature, our favorite day of the week, where we get a chance to jump into it and come on in and enjoy the conversation about what I think is probably, as old Chuck Heston just said on the intro, is in order of importance the First Amendment. It is the one right that allows other rights to exist at all. That's what it's really about. I mean, it was so important that the framers and founders put it right up there, right after the freedom of speech. You had to have something to back up that speech. You had to have it. You had to have something that would allow you to be able to speak your mind and be free without interference from the king or the crown or the governor or the militia or whoever it was. You had to be able to do it, and that's what the Second Amendment is all about here in these United States. We're going to talk a little bit about that this morning. We're also going to dive into this shooting that happened this week with Alec Baldwin, the actor, and I'm still torn on this. I'm leaning in one direction, but I am kind of torn because there are areas of expertise that we operate in, and I've watched a lot of commentary. I've read a lot of articles here over the last few days about this, and I've taken bits and pieces from each of these, and I'm kind of mulling them over in my own mind, and I'm going to kind of walk it out and work it out with you today and see what your thoughts are. I mean, first and foremost, my heart goes out to the family of the woman who was killed. Married, mother of one young child, and that's just the tragic part for sure. But we're going to go into some more of the details of this, and instead of just having a knee-jerk reaction that Alec Baldwin is an ass and we should hate him because of it, I'm going to try and analyze this a little more scientifically, and we're going to go through this and talk about it. All right. And what we're also going to do is we're also going to open up the phone lines. The number to call is 433-3150. That is the Pivotel call-in line. And once we break into this and I start talking a little bit about the Baldwin thing, I'm going to get your take on it as well. And you know what? In fact, I'm not even going to wait for me to talk about it. I'm going to ask you for your thoughts on the shooting and what you think about it. What do you think based on what you've heard, what you've learned, what's going on? Where do you think the blame lies on this? I'd love to hear what your thoughts are. Because I'll be honest with you, I've seen a plethora of opinions in a variety of different ways. And, of course, we've all seen the memes online, which, again, in pretty poor taste. Again, as much as I hate Alec Baldwin I don't hate him, but as much as I dislike him as an individual, this is still something that's been pretty tragic, and I think has, deserves a little bit more than kind of mocking scorn over it, and it's going to be an interesting conversation today. So the Pivotel lines are open at 433-3150, 433-3150. And we can chit chat about this. All right. We've also got some headlines and some other things as well. And then, we're going to finish up today, as we always do on Fridays, with my buddy Willie Waffle, wafflemovies.com. Willie's going to come on board, and he and I are going to hang out and talk about the entertainment news, and just it's the lighter-sided comment for the day. I mean, I do it for me more than I do it for a lot of you, just because Willie and I are friends, and I enjoy hanging out with him. And I think it's always a good way to kind of lighten up the day for Friday, because sometimes we get into some heavy topics, and it's good to kind of just remember that there's more to life than everything else than we've been talking about. So. All right, headlines and more. I got one phone call already, so we're going to talk about that here in just a second. I'm going to go over there to I'll go over to the phone lines here in just a second. Don't forget, you can also drop me an email. The email address is me@michaeldukeshow.com, me@michaeldukeshow.com. And finally, you can reach us in the chat room, which is attached to our Facebook page, facebook.com/Michael Duke Show. We simulcast the radio show on Facebook, YouTube, and Twitch, all at the same time every morning. But the main chat room is there on Facebook. You can also go to YouTube. I can see both the chats at the same time. So we'll go forward and we'll go forward and do it to it. All right. So let's dive into this and start talking about this Alec Baldwin thing. And we're going to start off with your phone calls and some of the comments that are in the chat room already. And we're going to talk about that. But let's start off with the phones and your thoughts on, again, this shooting death on the set of the movie Rust. And then I'll chime in here shortly on where I'm at on it, because I'm a little torn one way or the other. Let's go over there and see what you have to say. Good morning. Who's this? Where are you calling from?
It's Murph from the Denali area.
Good morning, Murph. What's on your mind there, dear?
Well, as a person who has taken a gun safety class, I feel that the ultimate responsibility for the accident does fall on Alec Baldwin, but I think that the other people that are involved should be held responsible for it too. But the ultimate thing is, you always check a gun to make sure it's not loaded, or if it is loaded, you still check it.
Right.
You don't just assume when somebody hands you a gun and says it's not loaded or whatever that it isn't loaded. You always check and you follow the basic rules. You never point the gun at a person. And the thing is, Alec Baldwin has been in many movies where he's, had a gun as the actor or something like that, and they all should be aware of the proper use of a gun. Ever since I took my gun safety class, when I watch a TV show these days or a movie or whatever, I always look to see if whoever the actor is handling the gun in the proper way.
Yeah.
But like I said, ultimately, he's responsible.
Right.
So I will listen to what everybody else has to say about it.
Well, Murph, I appreciate you. I appreciate you calling in on this and sounding off. Thank you for your thoughts on this. And in part, I agree with you that there is some responsibility on Baldwin's part, but I'm going to explain that later here as to why. It may not be for the same reason that Murph believes, but we're going to talk about that. Your thoughts on this? 433-3150, 907-433-3150 on the Pivotel line. Give us a call and tell us what your thoughts are in what you've read and what you've seen and what you've heard about Alec Baldwin and this shooting on the movie of the set of Rust. Especially, Baldwin has got a track record, a history of, bashing gun owners, bashing the NRA, bashing, a lot of things that those of us who would probably want to go see his movie, feel in these things. And so there is a bit of, it's kind of sad, but there's a bit of vindictive glee on the part of some people that he finally got his in some way, that he finally, his chickens came home to roost, so to speak, on this, which I find it's a little morbid and it's a little sad because somebody died here. And so I've seen this on some of the Facebook communities and some of the Facebook posts that I've seen. I try to keep politics off my Facebook, and the damn stuff just keeps coming back. I don't know why, but I see it as I scroll through sometimes in the morning, and it's morbid, and I think it's a little. I want to say it's a little hateful. We're supposed to be better than the people that we're fighting against, philosophically. We're supposed to be better than them. We're not supposed to, take joy when things like this happen. And I find that a little disturbing. Michael in the chat room says, first thing I learned about firearms was don't point it unless you're ready to shoot. And second was always check the chamber. Never assume someone checked it for you. Bill goes on to say, the blame lies with the person who pulled the trigger. If I had a firearm that I thought was unloaded and Greg picked it up, loaded it, and pointed at my ex and pulled the trigger, I would be in jail, not Greg or anybody else. Look, I agree that there are rules for firearm safety and that they're there for a reason. And if all those rules were followed, no one would ever be accidentally killed or hurt by a firearm. I mean, we kind of went over that earlier in the week when this first came out. The 4 rules of firearm safety are that every gun is loaded, that you always keep the gun pointed in a safe direction. You always keep your finger off the trigger until you are absolutely ready to fire, and that you are aware of your target and what is beyond your target, not just where your target is, but what is beyond your target, so you don't shoot something in the background as well. Those 4 rules, if they were followed, you could fire a gun, and as long as it was pointed in a safe direction, no one would be hurt. You could point a gun in an unsafe direction, and as long as you kept your finger off the trigger, no one would be hurt. And if you treated every gun like it was loaded, you wouldn't do any of the other things because you would think that it was loaded, right? So any one of those rules being violated is a direct cause of. It's one of the things why I say that there is no such thing as a negligent discharge. We always hear that. It's an ND. It's an ND, negligent discharge. It just went. No, it didn't just go off. Somebody obviously broke one of the 4 rules of firearm safety. They had it pointed in the wrong direction. They didn't treat it as if it was loaded. They weren't aware of where they had it pointed. Maybe they could see the target, but they weren't aware that there was a house of, orphans behind it or something. And, of course, the big one was that they got the booger hook off the bang switch, right? They kept their finger off the trigger. And you could point to almost any instance of negligent discharge, and it's really or an accidental discharge, and it's really a negligent discharge because they were negligent in following the rules of gun safety. And you would think in some ways that this would apply to the movies, but I'm coming to believe that there are special exceptions to this. And this is, that puts me directly at odds with people like Coolio Noir, who had a video about this earlier this week, where he blames it strictly on Alec Baldwin for a different reason, I think. And I would play the video, but it's got some language in it, and it's about 5 minutes long, so I don't want to do that. But I'll summate it for you in part during our conversation here this morning as we continue to talk about this. But let's go back over to the phones and see what you have to say on this. 433-3150. Good morning. Who's this? Where are you calling from?
Hi, Mike. Jeff from Homer.
Morning, Jeff.
I've been listening to some of this, and there's a lot to this. I mean, that obviously was during the movie. They obviously have safety precautions in place. He's obviously trained. He's been doing this for years. But he's also a target. Could have been set up. You don't know. We'll have to wait for the courts and the investigation to bring out the evidence before we speculate. And I don't think anybody should be speculating on whose fault it is, because this is a complicated thing. This is just not a gun that was put in my pickup and somebody put a shell in it and I caught it. Yes. Obviously a blank looks like a blank and a bullet looks like a bullet, but some don't. There's props. There's a lot of things we don't know that they do for tomfoolery, trickery on TV. And there's a lot of things that could be done to set him up because of what he said about people and been against guns a little bit. So he's being involved in law enforcement over the years. I know you hear these stories, and when you find out the real story, it's not even close to being the same. So I have to give him all the benefit of the doubt. Somebody did something somewhere. Somehow a bullet or something that could discharge to kill him may not have been a bullet. Might have been part of the blank that was wrong or something. You never know at close range or what was going on. So there's a lot to this, and I would hold back on any speculation. I really would. Not for just Alec Baldwin's defense. I'm not defending him or anybody else that shot somebody with a gun in this way, but they are all professionals. Yes, somebody's responsible, no doubt, but it'll come out in the wash, I think.
Well, I think we're finding out more and more. We're finding out that it was an actual bullet. We're finding out, there's a lot of details, and you're right, this is going to drag out for quite some time. This is going to be a long time investigation, and there's going to be a lot of questions that are going to be asked. But based on what we're seeing right now, I think that we can at least answer some of those questions, and we're going to at least attempt to do that here today, just to kind of
right.
Because I think it's an interesting. I think it's as tragic as it is. It's also something that we can learn a lot from, and I want to.
I guess if I was investigating this now that I heard about that bullet thing, but I wasn't going to bring it up.
Yeah.
I would have to figure in my head that either somebody put a real bullet in there and set him up, and/or got mixed in somehow. There's only two ways that can happen.
Right. Well, I think there's a lot of blame that can go around here, but I got to go. Thank you, Jeff, for your call. Folks, the Michael Duke Show continues. We've got 2 more lines on hold. Back with more right after this. Sorry about that. It was a little abrupt, but I realized I had waxed poetic a little too long there and was about to hit a hard break, so we had to jump over that. Let's go over to the chat or to the phone lines. We got another line on hold here that is held with us. Let's get their name and see where they are and who they are, and we'll get them. We'll take their call as soon as we get to the back to the radio. Good morning. Who's this? Where are you calling from?
Hey, how you doing, Mike? It's Fred. How you been?
Hey, Fred. I'm doing good, my friend. You want to hold the line here, and I'll be right back to you?
Sure thing.
All right, hold the line. Fred is back in Rhode Island for us here. Michael continues to say, I think Baldwin bears some responsibility, but whoever was the master of arms for the set bears the most responsibility. Henry says, good morning, being hostile because he has a reputation. Excuse me. Ow. A little tickle in my throat there. And I'm not supposed to cough. Being hostile because he has a reputation for being a hothead and a jerk, it's something that should be looked at more objectively than how liberals act regarding President Trump. What happened is very tragic and sad. I guess even if you are not a gun person, safety should be a priority. Verify the gun is empty and he was pointing it at someone, or what exactly happened with that. Okay. And then Brian says, you got to admit that some of the memes are pretty clever, even if inappropriate. I'm not saying that they weren't clever, okay? There are some clever memes out there, but again, morbid and I guess a little too soon. For some of that. That's just me, Look, Alec Baldwin, I like him as an actor. I think he's a pretty darn good actor. One of my favorite movies is he's the main star in one of my favorite movies, The Shadow. I love that. I love that movie. I mean, it's corny and it's sometimes, but it's just, I used to listen to The Shadow when I was a kid, and that movie was great. That movie was really good, especially Tim Curry. Tim Curry kind of takes that show. But yeah, Alec Baldwin is, he's a maniac. He's obviously highly narcissistic, and he's got some issues. Let's just put it that way. But I would not wish this on anybody. So we're gonna continue to get everybody's take on this, and then I'm gonna break probably in the last segment, and I'm gonna get into what my thoughts are on this. Coleon Noir breaks it down in his video where he talks about it, and he says specifically that Alec Baldwin is to blame for this because he's anti-gun. And because he's anti-gun, he failed to follow the rules of firearm safety. He failed to do all those things. And that while it's a tragedy, it's ultimately his fault. Now, I will say that, well, I guess I'll give you a little preview. I do believe that ultimately he has responsibility for this, but not for the reasons that Coleon Noir says that goes to talk about, because there is an exemption. I mean, we talk about the 4 rules of gun safety, and they are canon. I mean, they are gospel, but there are exceptions to every rule. And in the case of a movie or television set, that's one of those exceptions. Quite honestly, it's one of the reasons why those sets require the hiring of a armorer or a prop master, an armorer specifically, instead of just a generic prop master, because you are dealing with things that are of actual deadly weapons. And I want to talk a little bit about that this morning as well. But really, it's one of the few places in the world that there is an exception to that rule. And I want to talk about how that breaks down, and how, while I think that again, I'm a bit torn on some of this, but I think that Alec Baldwin bears responsibility, but probably for not the reason that you would expect. All right. So we'll get into that here in just a hot second. It is the Michael Dukes Show. Common sense, liberty-based, free thinking radio. Fred's Call up next. We're back here on the program, The Michael Dukes Show, Common Sense Radio, taking your phone calls. We've been talking about the shooting on the set of the movie Rust. Alec Baldwin accidentally killing the director of photography and wounding the director in an incident this week, which has raised headlines and eyebrows and has got a lot of people up in arms, and I think has got people, we're seeing some of the vindictiveness of people who obviously dislike Alec Baldwin for good reason. For good reason. I mean, he's not a hugely likable person for folks who are of a more conservative bent because of the things that he's done and the things that he said. But I want to get your take on this, because I'm going to tell you that probably my take on this is a lot different than many of yours. And I've kind of evolved into this because my initial reaction, if you go back in the show earlier this week, when it was announced that this happened, my earlier reaction was, well, he didn't follow the 4 rules of gun safety, and that's why, and so this is directly, really directly his fault. The majority of it is his fault. But I've come around on that, because again, the 4 rules of gun safety are, I was just saying, they're canon, they're important, they are gospel. But there are exceptions to every rule, and one of those exceptions is a movie set or a television set, because the specific purpose of those things is to make you believe, to create a suspension of disbelief, to immerse you in a fictitious reality. And to do that, certain things have to happen, and we're going to talk about that here in a minute, but we've got another phone call. Fred is calling in from Rhode Island. He listens out there to us every Friday. Good morning, my friend. What is on your mind?
Hi, good morning, Mike. You know, there's one take that I can't really understand with this Alec Baldwin nonsense is, they say it was a live round. There was a live round in the firearm.
Right.
Okay. If it's a live round, what is a live round doing on a movie set? I mean, that's number one.
Right.
You know, I mean,
no, absolutely.
Above and beyond all other things, what is a live round doing anywhere near, not even on the movie set itself? It doesn't make any sense. I mean, you know, when you clean your gun, what's another main rule of firearm safety? When you're cleaning the gun or dismantling the gun, where's the ammunition? Nowhere near anywhere you are in the firearm when you're doing it.
Right. Well, anybody.
So what is it doing? What is live ammunition doing anywhere near a movie set?
Right. Well, anybody who practices dry firing knows that, again, the first rule is you completely unload the firearm and you put the ammunition somewhere far away from where you're doing your dry firing, because you don't want to accidentally pick up a magazine while you're doing dry firing exercises and accidentally load a live magazine into it. So you're 100% right. In fact, when I have dry firing, I have 2 magazines that I use for dry firing that are loaded with dummy rounds, that I just keep those, and I unload the pistol, and then I walk across the room with just the 2 magazines that have got the orange rounds in them, so that I know for sure that I'm not going to cause a problem. And so you're 100% right. You know, there's many questions. Why was there live ammunition? Why were they using why were the firearms leaving the set? There was talk about them shooting, going down and plinking down on the range earlier in the day or the night before with the same firearms that they were using, which I guess under strict supervision would not be bad. But the idea that some of those live rounds made it back to the set, I mean, there's a lot of questions here. But you're right. That is 100% true.
Well, not in the live round, situation. There's one other thing too. You know, for all the years that Hollywood and movie producers have been doing shows with firearms, making movies with firearms, you figure at some point in time, someone would have figured out, from an armorer's point of view, from a gunsmithing point of view, how come these guns aren't modified to not accept a live round? I mean, it's so easy. You take a 6-shooter, you take an SAA, single action army, cowboy gun. You could easily plug the end of those cylinders, with a bushing with a hole in it, so it would not accept the live rounds. You have to make up a special blank, short blank. Take the case, cut it, load it with a limited amount of powder and a non-projectile wad at the end, and it goes bang. But you could never put a live round in it, and if you swap cylinders out, or even a rifle or any firearm, a shotgun, it just cannot accept a live round,
Right.
I mean, it's just common sense, You don't want to have any possibility of an accident or a mistake with a live round in a firearm when you're on a movie set.
Right.
And you figure they would have figured that out. I mean, money does not guarantee smart, obviously. And Hollywood's a shining example of that, obviously.
Right. Well, some of that is, I mean, there are prop guns that are modified to not accept rounds. There are, but they're few and far between, primarily, I think, because they're very expensive and it's very hard. I mean, you don't want to have to go in a movie, in a movie, when a gun is fired, obviously there's the blossom of flame from the muzzle blast, and you don't, to complicate a small handheld firearm by blocking it off so it can't accept real rounds, but still is able to produce the actual realistic flame at the end of the muzzle, so they don't have to go back in post-production and make it a graphical, to make a computer graphics that it's a flame. You know what I mean? I mean, there's a lot of things there. It's very expensive. Now, in the history of, they've been using guns on movie sets since the late 20s, early 30s, and
since the inception of movies itself.
Right. Yeah, exactly. I mean, since the inception of movies and cowboy movies and shooters and stuff like that, they've been using guns that whole time. And in the history of all that, this is the third such death that I can think of in the entire movie industry where a person was accidentally killed, but with a prop gun. It was Brandon Lee was killed. the guy from the show Voyagers that I talked about, and now this one. So that's a pretty good track record as far as accidents go. But this all falls in a lot of ways, again, and I'm gonna agree partially with what Michael said, this falls back on the armorer. The armorer is directly responsible for a lot of this stuff, and as long as there's no mixing and matching, that can happen. But you're right, Fred. The question now becomes, is it better to go back in and paint in the muzzle blast on gunshots in movies like John Wick or something else, or is it something else? So anyway, you can
sit there and look at the fact that it's expensive to modify the gun, so it cannot accept the round. Well, they can try to put the price on a life. I mean,
it's true.
They're very easy.
It's true. I mean, it is true, Fred. I mean, it's not a bad question. Thank you so much for your call. I appreciate you sounding off this morning, Fred. Thanks for being part of it this morning.
Have a good day now, Mike.
You bet. 433-3150, the Pivotel call-in line, if you'd like to sound off and give us your thoughts on this shooting on the movie set. Bill goes on to say in the chat room, why isn't the anti-gun crowd screaming for all the guns to be removed from the movies? Well, that's already started. That's actually a discussion that's going on right now. Some of the anti-gun crowd is asking why there should be, we shouldn't be removing guns or, again, making them all fake guns or, that kind of question. And the reason why they don't do fake guns is for the reasons that I just outlined, that it's very difficult to try and, it's very difficult and expensive. Could you imagine a John Wick movie where they weren't using blanks to get the realistic muzzle blasts? And, how many gunshots were in that movie that they would have to then paint in with CGI at every opportunity? Now, I've watched some films, especially the independent films that are, small independent films where they did have to use like airsoft guns and then painted it in, and it's not as realistic. I mean, it is what it is. So I think it would be less satisfying. And remember, when it comes to it, we do demand realism. And Brian just said that. Are we, as the movie-going audience, partially responsible because we demand realism? Yes. I mean, we are partially responsible in that regard because we demand realism. And ironically enough, probably most of the non-gun people wouldn't really notice, but you know who really demand it is the gun people. And I think it was Jeff who was saying it earlier. We would see when something wasn't right. We would see when, if they were doing something that wasn't right, we would notice it and it would break the realism. And we'd, one of my favorite things for my friend Brendan Berger is he'll call me up and he'll say, okay, did you see this movie? And I'm like, yep. And he'll like, okay, go gunsend it for me. Which means, he wants me to gunsend the movie. Like, how was the proper firearms handling done? Was it realistic? Was what could they, did he have a 6-shooter and he shot 23 times before they ever showed him reloading, kind of thing. And it breaks the realism of the whole moment. But that feeds right back into my argument of what I was saying, which is, while the 4 rules of gun safety are gospel, there are exceptions to every rule, and it's one of the reasons why I think that this instance is not caused per se by the violation of the 4 rules by Alec Baldwin. So it's an interesting conversation, and we're going to continue it on the next in the next segment. I'm going to break it down for you where I'm coming from now. And again, I've come off my position. Initially, my initial knee-jerk reaction was to say, well, this is Alec Baldwin, and he should have followed the 4 rules of gun safety, and he didn't, and so he carries a lot of the blame on this, and yada, yada, yada. But I have come off that position a bit, and I'm going to explain that to you on the other side. That's what I'm going to do. So we're going to take a break. When I come back, we're going to talk about this because there's a lot of moving parts to this. And I think we can learn from this. Even as tragic as it is, we can learn. The Michael Duke Show. Common sense, liberty-based, free-thinking radio.
We're broadcasting live through a series of tubes.
Allowing all of these entities to provide streaming stuff going on the internet.
Well, it's kind of hard to explain. Sorry. Streaming live every weekday morning on Facebook Live and MichaelDukesShow.com.
Okay. Okay, fine. All right. Well, good. Let's get back into some of the comments here in the chat room. Actually, I got a line on hold, so let's go over to the phones and see if we can get this caller's name and where they're calling from, and we'll start off the next segment with them before I jump into my part of it. Good morning. Who's this? Where are you calling from?
Good morning. This is Brian from Fairbanks.
Hello, Brian from Fairbanks. Hold the line, my friend. You'll be first up in the queue when we return to the radio here in just a hot minute, so don't go anywhere. Greg is out of jail. He's out of Facebook jail. So everybody give Greg a hand. Big high five, big golf clap. Big golf clap for Greg getting out of jail. Now let's see how long you can stay out of jail, okay? Let's see if he can stay out of jail. That's what it's all about. MD, coming in late on this chat, apparently, because I used the word firearms in the headline today, a lot of you didn't get notifications. I had stopped doing that, and then I decided, screw it. I'm broadcasting across several platforms, so why not just actually put the description in there that needs to be put in there? And it obviously caused some of you not to get your notifications this morning because Facebook is a bitch. That's why. Coming in late this morning, but curious, is there not rules to mixing ammo on sets? Read that folks were doing live fire target practice the day before then this incident. Yes, exactly. That is one of the major questions. Now, I can understand taking the actors out to allowing them to get customized to the firearm. But there are rules about mixing ammo on the set, and I'm going to get into that in the next segment a bit. And something obviously happened here. Something obviously happened here that violated some of those rules and regs, so to speak. And so definitely a difficult situation. He is either innocent, Ren says, and I'm assuming he's talking about Alec Baldwin. He is either innocent or a very dangerous person. Does he get a little too invested in his role as a bad guy? How about shutting people up like Justin Bieber that expose the Hollywood underbelly? I don't know what that means or why Bieber would be shutting. You could spread the guilt as thin as you want, but the fault is with Baldwin, says Paul. I'm not saying that he's blameless here. That's not my point, and I'm gonna wrap it back around to that here in a hot second here, Paul. So I'm not trying to spread the guilt as thin as I want. I'm just trying to say that there are nuances to this that I don't think it could all be right directly laid at the lap of Baldwin. I'm going to explain that here in a minute. We got Brian in Fairbanks on the phone, and we just got a new caller, so let's go over there and get their name and where they're calling from and seeing what's going on. Good morning. Who's this? Where are you calling from?
Good morning. This is Ron Bernier. I'm calling from Meadow Lakes.
Good morning, Ron. Why don't you hold the line, my friend? We'll be right back to you, okay?
Okay, thank you.
All right, thank you. You'll be right after Brian. Brian is ahead of you in the queue for the phone, but as soon as we get back to him, we will, or as soon as we get done with him, we'll be back to you. Okay, so Brian and then Ron. All right, we got it. If an accident had happened during actual filming of a scene when he was handed the gun for filming, or if he was playing with the gun between scenes, that makes a big difference. That's true as well, is it? What is this 1600 Pandas Tour 2A thing? I have no idea. 1600 Pandas. I have no idea. I have no idea what you're talking about. Brian, no idea. And why is my Skype going off in the background? I don't know why. We'll fix that, though, won't we? We'll just turn that stuff off. I don't know what. I don't know what that is. 1600 Pandas Tour 2A thing. What do I know about the EAA Corp Wyrook Windicator? Nothing. I don't know anything about it. I'm not familiar with it as all. So you'll have to tell me. I posted it. I posted it where? I have no idea what you're talking about, Brian. But now I'm a little nervous. Where did I post it, and what are you talking about? Oh, that was a pandas. Oh, I'm out of. Is that what you're talking about? I posted a yay meme for Greg getting out of jail. It was a little sticker, and it's a panda shooting out of a thing. So I don't know if that's what you're talking about or what. All right, here we go, folks. Jumping back into it, the Michael Dukes Show. Common sense, liberty-based, free-thinking radio. All right, we're back here. Welcome back to the program, The Michael Dukes Show, Common Sense Radio. Continuing our discussions now on this event this week, the shooting on the movie Rush. We've been talking about the situation. Alec Baldwin, of course, the actor, accidentally shooting a couple people on set with what he thought was a cold gun, a gun loaded with blanks, but turned out that it actually had a live round in it. And, he's been eviscerated in part by people on the right, I think in part because he is such a vindictive person to those said people as well. But I don't think it's as cut and dried as that, but I'm going to give you my take on it here in a hot second. First, before we do that, though, we got two lines on hold. Brian is in Fairbanks. We're going to start off with him. Brian, what's on your mind?
Well, I just wanted to bring up about Alec Baldwin. I heard that he shot that woman. The woman was part of a Durham investigation into the Clintons, and that he shot her for that reason, to shut her up.
That's Durham investigation into the Clintons? I had not heard that at all. That's...
Yeah, Bill Durham, Bill Durham, was it?
I have no idea.
Anyway.
That's what
that's what I heard. That makes sense to me. The Clintons would be in there trying to get her because she apparently knows stuff, and her father was part of, he was a big shot in the CIA or something like that, and now she's gone. So look at that one.
Well,
somebody else heard that.
Yeah, no, I hadn't heard that. I hadn't heard that at all. It sounds, I don't know. It sounds a bit like a bit of a reach to me, but maybe somebody else has heard something similar. I've never heard anything like that. But I appreciate your call, Brian. Thank you so much. Let's go over to Ron at Meadow Lakes. Ron in Wasilla, what's happening?
Good morning. Hey, ultimately, Alex is to blame. When it comes down to it, though, they're going to drag the prop people in there and just try to push the blame over onto them, which they may have something to do with that, because obviously there's a bullet in the gun. Right.
But you're saying ultimately Alec Baldwin is to blame.
He is to blame, but in court, when this all shakes down, they're going to drag that prop guy through the mud and try to push that blame over onto him.
Right.
And, yeah.
Okay.
I think it's just going to go down that way.
I'm going to agree with you in part, but not for the reasons that you think, and I'm going to break down why that is here in just a second, Ron. I think Alec Baldwin will be in part labeled with some of the blame, and I think rightfully so, and we'll talk about that here. in a second, but I'm not for the reasons that I think that I don't think you and I will reach the same conclusion, but not for the same reasons. So I appreciate it, Ron. Thank you for your thoughts on this, but let me jump into this and tell you why I'm saying that. Again, Coleon Noir going on about how this was that this was all because of the failure of the 4 rules of gun safety. And I've just mentioned it a couple times that, the 4 rules of gun safety are gospel, but there are a few exceptions. And one of the places where that has to happen is on a movie set, because you are creating a fictional world. You're trying to suspend the disbelief of the audience. You're trying to make it as realistic as possible so that people can experience things that they would never experience before, looking down the barrel. Dirty Harry leveling his .44 Magnum at the camera saying, "So what is it going to be, punk? Are you going to make my day? Do you feel lucky?" Right? I mean, that's the kind of drama and the kind of realism that they're trying to recreate here. And so I think that, you get that scene. You can't get that when you're trying to follow the 4 rules of gun safety. Therefore, it goes back to the experts. Now, I saw in a very interesting video that Rob Pincus had posted from a guy who used to work in Hollywood. He worked in Hollywood on television and movie sets, and had done some cowboy action shooting, and he was talking specifically about the safety of the movie sets and things that go on. He says, so, for example, you've probably seen behind-the-scenes footage of movies where they wire up an actor to do a scene where the actor has to either, fly or be thrown or jumps or, has to do something, and it's in front of a green screen, right? And so the actor is all girdled up in a harness, and the prop, the stunt master or the prop master, the person who's in charge, the expert, comes in, and before they do this scene where the actor is going to be yanked across the room or dropped from a height or jump up to a whatever, the expert comes in and he checks the harness. He checks the harness on the rig to make sure that everything's safe, that the actor is squared away, that the actor is not going to be injured. Now, imagine if the moment that the guy who's the expert on the harness and the stunt coordinator or the prop master comes in and checks everything, then the actor goes in and starts pulling on the things and cords and wires and Velcro and everything, buckles and everything else to check it himself. Well, then the stunt guy has to come back in and recheck everything all over again because you've just undone the work of the expert, right? You have to put your trust in the experts who are on your set that, you don't know how to rig a harness for a jump or for a parachute or something like that you're doing for a movie, but you've got to trust the experts that are there. Then we come back to the realism aspect of it. Now, remember, this was a cowboy movie. This is an old Western movie. So they're using single-action Army revolvers, right? Open-faced revolvers. Well, if the gun was unloaded, you could very obviously see, looking down, if the camera angle is anywhere near the facing of the cylinders, you can see that the cylinders would be empty, which for a lot of us would immediately bust the immersion of the moment. And so what armorers have to do is they have to put dummy rounds, which are fully loaded rounds, have a cartridge and the brass, but they have no primer or powder, right? So they can fill the cylinder up, and you could see the noses of the bullets inside the cylinder. But they still have to make the firearm actually go bang. And so what do? Well, they intersperse that in a certain sequence that is provided by the script or by the director that says he's got to fire once or he's got to fire twice, and then he's got to stand and you got to take the slow shot or whatever. And so they have to intersperse those with blank rounds, which are short, no projectile, got some wadding, they've got a primer, they've got powder, they've got a short case, and you've got to intersperse that. Now, imagine that you're about to do a scene and the armorer has set the gun up with the dummy rounds around the outside, around it, so it looks like it's loaded from the outside. And then, but it's also got blanks in there so that you can fire your 1 or 2 shots or whatever else you need to do. Now imagine after the armorer gives it to you or places it in your holster, you pick it out and open it up and spin it around to look at it and see what's going on. You've completely undone all the armorer's work. And again, with the dummy rounds, you can, you look from the front, it looks like it's loaded. So do you have to eject each round to make sure that it's a dummy round? Is that at some point you have to have trust in the experts, the people on stage or on the set who are in charge of that. The guy on the video that Rob Pincus loaded likened it to an airliner pilot. He's got to have some trust in his ground crew that they did the proper maintenance or stowed the proper deal or latched the proper hatch on the airplane. He can't go out and check everything himself. He's got to have some faith in this. Now, I think where this all falls apart, of course, is the fact that this movie had already had some serious issues. This movie had already had a bunch of the union film workers walk off the set within just a day or two of this incident, prior to this incident, because of perceived safety violations or safety concerns that were going on the set. They had already walked off, and they had instead hired non-union folks to continue to run the movie because the union people had walked off and said it was too dangerous. One of the things that we saw that I think is going to be one of the main contributors to this, and I think is going to be probably, I don't know if you'd call it a scapegoat or where most of the blame is going to lie with the head armorer, who in this case was a 24-year-old woman named Hannah Gutierrez Reed. Now, she has no special trainings or licenses to ensure that she was a qualified Hollywood armorer, and I don't even know if she was a member of the union at that point. Her father is a well-known Hollywood armorer, and maybe that's what they were depending on, was just depending on his knowledge, as somehow she absorbed some of his knowledge or whatever. But I think a lot of this is going to go back to her on this, that she was inexperienced and was probably a contributor to some of these safety violations that were going on the set. I'm up against the break. I want to continue with this. I want to tell you more about what I think and how this is ultimately going to conclude, but we're going to come back to that here in just a moment. It is The Michael Dukes Show, common sense, liberty-based, free-thinking radio. Tony says, caller could be correct. I think she's talking about Brian from Fairbanks and the whole Clinton angle. Just because we haven't heard it doesn't mean it isn't true. Just saying. Well, sure. I mean, I heard it was aliens that came down and, appeared to Alec Baldwin and told them to shoot. I mean, okay. I mean, Dodie, I'm as willing to believe something as the next guy, but you got to kind of show me a little bit of proof. You can't just say, well, the Clintons did it. This was all a Clinton plot because he was going to, this director of photography was going to, she was going to narc out the Clintons on something like, I mean, sorry, I don't buy that. Anyway, it's crazy. It's crazy what's going on. Anyway, let's see what else we got here. Man, so sad. Every pilot worth his salt does a complete walk around of the plane prior to takeoff. Yeah, I mean, and I guess, Bill, it is not just the things you can externally see. You've got to trust in the people who are the experts, right? You got to trust that the guy who is supposed to lube the tires or whatever on the landing gear, or make sure that the landing gear would retract, or has took the gripe list and did the right thing with the gripe list. You got to trust people at some point. It's part of the well-oiled machine thing, right? That's got to happen. You got to trust that your mechanics, lubricated the jack screw in the top of your Is it still too soon for that? That lubricated the jack screw at the top of the ailerons here at the rudder at the back to make sure that it would fly. Torqued the nut correctly. Right, exactly. So, I mean, there has to be some trust in there because you can't be an expert in everything. And so I'm going to break that down a little bit further when we get back, and we'll talk about that a little more. Damn, nobody told me that having fractured ribs would hurt so bad. Holy cow. I mean, at least I can breathe. I guess a lot of people who fracture their ribs can't even take a breath without pain. I can take a breath without pain. But I cannot cough. I cannot laugh. I cannot, do that, can't do any of that. But when the plane crashes, they hardly ever blame the ground crew, says Bill. That's true. That's true. The captain is the one that's, the buck stops there, which is one of the reasons why I think Alec Baldwin is ultimately going to be held partially responsible for this, and I'll talk about that here in just a second. I didn't say I believe the caller, just that we do not have all the facts. Just because you don't know about something doesn't mean it didn't happen. That was all I was saying. Well, right, but I mean, okay. I mean, there are things that are possibly believable, and then there are things that, plus, I mean, Brian has come out with some pretty outlandish stuff in the past. So I'm just saying that you gotta consider the source at that point. So that's all I was saying. That's all I was saying. What are you guys doing this weekend? What are you guys doing? Rib injuries suck eggs. The challenge has been made. Make me laugh. That's not too hard because I'm. Don't do that. Okay. Ow. Let's see. What was the story I wanted to get to? And we may not get to it because we're on this Baldwin thing so much, but I got an armed citizen story here, which I always find armed citizen stories very encouraging. Brian says he's going to go to a dog class and help his second daughter build a desk. Football game tonight. Work, school, work, school for my weekend. I'm going out to help broadcast the Shriners Classic game tomorrow. And then on Sunday, I'm doing absolutely nothing. I'm sleeping for 14 hours. I guarantee it. It'll be a long. I will have a nice sleep for the whole weekend. Because I usually only operate on about 5 or 6 hours of sleep a night for the weeknights, and then every Friday night and Saturday night I sleep like the dead to try and make up. I don't know. They say you can never make up sleep. I mean, I don't necessarily believe it because I always feel better after I've slept, 12 or 14 hours. But and I'm getting older, man. I used to be able to do that all the time. I used to be able to work a couple days straight. I remember when Terry and I first met, I was working 3 jobs, and I was literally working my day job, picking up a cab and driving a cab for 12 hours, and then picking up my day job again the next morning with like a cat nap in the middle in the parking lot waiting for the doors to open. And then I would sleep for 14 hours the next day for the weekend. I mean, I can't do that anymore. This is getting old as hell. I mean, it is absolute hell. I don't need that. All right. Susie says she's been awake all night, just couldn't sleep. It's a rough thing. Susie, do you use melatonin? Can I just say that melatonin is a lifesaver? If you don't take it, you probably should. You probably should. I can only take about half a dose because it makes me groggy enough that I have a harder time getting up early in the morning on the weekdays. But on the weekends, oh, baby, I'll pound down a full 5 milligrams of melatonin, and I am gone. Oof, so good. So good. Evens you out, and it's good for you for other reasons as well. But melatonin is definitely one of the things that you should add to your supplement list if you haven't. They got those melt-aways. Fred Meyers has got it's got a purple cap, and it's like a 5 milligram strawberry-flavored melt-away melatonin or something. I just put it under my tongue, and I'm gone. I am gone. All right, folks, let's jump back into it. Here we go, The Michael Dukes Show. Common sense, liberty-based, free-thinking rodeo. Hour 2 dead ahead. Let's get this thing going on.
Whoa, buddy. Put that thing back in its holster. We haven't gone anywhere.
I don't understand.
Check out themichaeldukesshow.com for information on how to get access to the podcast.
The Michael Dukes Show.
I have 2 guns, one for each of you.
Firearms Friday.
As Thomas Jefferson stated, it is the right and duty of the people to be at all times armed.
Say hello to my little friend.
I say that the Second Amendment is, in order of importance, the First Amendment. The right to keep and bear arms is the one right that allows rights to exist at all.
The Michael Dukes Show. The right to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed. Not be infringed. Firearms.
From my cold, dead hands.
Friday.
Here's my rifle, this is my gun. This is for fighting, this is for fun.
Firearms Friday.
Firearms Friday. Your chance to sound off on issues of a Second Amendment nature right here on The Michael Dukes Show. Thanks for coming in and joining us. Hour 2 of the big radio broadcast. And if you're just joining us, we spent the last hour or so dissecting and talking a little bit with you, with the listeners, mostly, about this shooting this last week on the set of the movie Rust, where Alec Baldwin, the producer and the main character of the movie, had a gun on the set that he was issued by the armorer that was then used and ended up shooting one of the principal directors of photography and the director, killing the director of photography, a young woman with a married young child. I mean, just a tragedy. It's an absolute tragedy. My heart goes out to her. My heart goes out to Alec Baldwin. I mean, it's a, when you take a life inadvertently like that, I'm sure that it's just absolutely crushing. But the question was, how could we have avoided this? Where does the blame lie? And it seems like that universally, many folks believe that Alec Baldwin is primarily to blame for this. And I'm going to probably fly in the face of this with a lot of you. I mean, even gun gurus and Second Amendment guys like Colio Noir are basically saying, well, the violation of the 4 rules of the gun safety, and that was what the, blah, 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 blah. This was, this is the problem. As I was just going through in the last segment, and I guess I'll recap a little bit in the last segment, the 4 rules of gun safety are gospel. And for those of you who don't know, and I guess we should go over that more on the show, and we don't. I guess it's one of my failings, one of my many failings. But on Firearms Friday, I'm here to educate the uneducated about firearms, and I fail to go over the 4 rules of gun safety all the time. But the 4 rules of gun safety are as follows. Every gun is loaded. That you treat every gun as if it was loaded. You keep your finger off the trigger until you are absolutely ready to fire. Until the second you are ready to fire is the only time you put your finger on the trigger. You always keep your gun pointed in a safe direction. And finally, you are aware of your target, not just your target, but what is beyond your target. And if any of those 4 rules, get violated, that's how people get hurt. If you avoid, if you violate one of the rules, but keep the others, you might be safe. So as I was saying earlier, if you pull the trigger, put your finger on the trigger and pull the trigger, but it's pointed in a safe direction, you're okay. If you had it pointed in an unsafe direction, but you don't put your finger on the trigger, and it's okay. If you treat every gun like it's loaded and it's not loaded, but you keep it pointed in a safe direction and keep your finger off the trigger, it's okay. I mean, you could go through these things, but these are rules. And of course, a lot of the folks in the gun community are immediately saying, well, he should have checked it. He should have known. He should have, when they handed him a gun, he should have checked it, and it's all his fault. Except for in the movie, and he shouldn't have pointed it at her, and he shouldn't have done this, and he shouldn't have done that. I mean, we've been to the movies. We've seen it. I mean, in fact, one of the first scenes I can remember as a kid is watching Dirty Harry point the .44 Magnum right at the camera and say, "Do you feel lucky?" or "Make my day," or whatever the phrase was, whichever the first movie was that he came up with that, where you're looking basically down the barrel of a .44 Magnum on the thing. So while the 4 gun rules are gospel, there are certain exceptions, and in a movie and a television set, that's probably one of the places that there are an exception. Now, because of that, movies and television sets have specific people on them that are supposedly in charge of these tools, these props, these guns that are real guns but not shooting real bullets, generally speaking, right? And they are called prop masters, or in the case of the firearms, they're armorers, right? Weapons masters are armorers. And so at some point, an actor has to have a certain amount of faith in the people that they're working with. I was talking about if you've got to do a stunt as an actor and you've got to be yanked up in the air, you got to be thrown back by an explosion, or you've got to leap across an opening between 2 buildings. So they put you in a wire harness, right? They put you in a rig, in a wire rig, and so they harness you up, and usually it's in front of a green screen, and you got wires and cables going everywhere, and you may look like you're going to be hundreds of feet off the ground, but maybe you're only going to be 10 feet off the ground. Well, you could still, trust me, I know you could still hurt yourself tripping across a curb, let alone falling 10 feet to the ground on your noggin. You could hurt yourself. And so they have experts that come in and they put you in a harness and they check your harness to make sure you're all going to be safe. And here's the thing. If, to use the argument of, well, he should have checked the gun, if they put you in a wire rig and a harness to make sure that you're safe, and this is the guy's the expert in everything, and the second he turns around and says you're good to go and walks away, you start pulling at the buckles and the Velcro to check it yourself, well, you've screwed it all. He's got to come back and do it all over again. Same thing with a cowboy movie, right? You've got a 6-shooter that you can see from a distance if the gun is pointed in your direction, whether it's loaded or not. So they put dummy rounds in the cylinders so you can see the noses of the bullets coming out of the cylinders so that it looks realistic on camera, but it still needs to be able to shoot. Still needs to be able to produce flame. Still needs to be able to follow the script to say he fires 2 shots. And so if the armorer sets up the gun with dummy rounds and blanks in a certain combination so that you could see the bullet still and know that it's loaded, but that the actor could still draw the gun or shoot the gun once or twice or whatever needs to happen, then if they hand him the gun or they put the gun in his holster and say you're good to go, if he takes it out and starts looking at it, spins the cylinder, now he's totally blown the timing of the gun so that he'll pull it and it won't go bang and everything else. I mean, at some point you have to have trust in the experts that are on your set. Now, that being said, you have to make sure your experts are experts. And I think where this whole thing is going to fall apart for Alec Baldwin and company is the fact that, one, it's being reported that just a day or 2 before this incident on the set, a huge chunk of their crew, I don't know if it's a huge, but a chunk of their crew, union crew members, walked off the set due to perceived safety violations on the set. Now, they didn't say specifically firearms, but they said safety violations. And they were replaced by locals or non-union people or whatever. And then what we've also found out is that the armorer on the set is 24-year-old Hannah Gutierrez Reed. She was the head armorer. Now, she had, according to reports, she had no special training or licenses to ensure she was qualified beyond what she may have been taught by her father, who is a well-known Hollywood armorer. And just as an example by contrast, if animals are used in the movie, the set is closely supervised by the American Humane Society certified animal safety representative who oversees the treatment of the animals. Movie companies get their scripts approved by the American Humane Society in advance, and they sign off on the credentials of any animal handlers. They have veterinarians there, and in exchange for all these things, they get to put at the end of the movie, no animals were harmed in the production of this film. So Hollywood is very serious about the safe handling of animals on the set, but maybe not so much the case about guns. Now, they do care about gun safety, and in fact, at the Warner Brothers Studios website, they even have them typed up in all capital letters so you can actually see what's going on. In capital letters, it says, treat all firearms as if they are loaded. Number 1, do not engage in horseplay with any firearms or weapons. Okay. Never point a firearm at anyone, including yourself, and if called upon to do so, consult the property master, if the scene calls for it. Whenever possible, simulated or dummy weapons should be utilized. And then the final one is live ammunition is not to be brought onto a studio lot, stage, or location. Now, there is such a thing as a licensed armorer for movie companies, but that license comes from the union. And it appears that it may have been that this Hannah Reed was not a licensed union armorer. So here's where it comes down. Here's where it comes down to, and I think what it's going to look like in the end. Probably do it because, again, it was being reported that the night before, they were out using these guns to shoot real targets. They were out actually target shooting with these guns, which, again, I wouldn't be opposed to if you went off the lot and you went somewhere else and you shot the guns. So, I mean, maybe it was maybe it was to acclimatize the actors to the recoil of the pistol and to get them situated. I don't know. But that last one, live ammunition is not to be brought onto a studio lot, stage, or location. That's a biggie, especially since we found out that there was this was not a blank malfunction, that there was an actual bullet in this gun. That's what's being reported. There was an actual live round in the chamber of this gun that Alec Baldwin ended up shooting the director of photography, the DP, and the director with. So here's where I think it's going to come down to. Question, why do you keep pushing that the armorer is 24 years old? Should age be judged here? I'm not saying that a 24-year-old couldn't get the job done. I'm just saying that, do I think that age plays into it? Maybe. I'm actually probably a little more judgmental than I should be, because this gal also had a TikTok and an Instagram page where she did all kinds of crazy, what I would consider to be kind of immature things. And so maybe I am calling the maturity of the armorer into question. She's since deleted all those pages, by the way. So, I mean, there's that. But once it's on the internet, it's forever. But here's what I think is going to happen. Alec Baldwin is going to be held partially responsible, not as an actor and not necessarily for his actions, but because of the fact that he's an executive producer of this movie. And the production company and the producers are probably going to be held liable for this. I think ultimately they will probably hang a lot of this on Hannah Reed as a young and inexperienced armorer. But that ultimately Alec Baldwin will also be held partially responsible because he's the one that hired her. And you have this report of the union people walking off the set for perceived safety violations. They know that that's what's going to be going on. So, I mean, I think that's how it's going to. I think that's how it's going to go out, in my opinion. That he is responsible, not necessarily because he pointed the gun, not necessarily because he is anti-gun himself, not necessarily because he violated the 4 rules of gun safety, but I think ultimately he'll be held responsible because he probably didn't hire the right professionals for the job. And that he will be held responsible for that. But, you know, again, this is kind of a toss-up. I mean, he is still responsible ultimately. So, anyway, I mean, to me, this is just a very interesting idea and a very interesting situation. Well, that while tragic, maybe we can learn a few things from. 433-3150, 433-3150 is the phone number. If you'd like to sound off, you can call in on the Pivotel call-in line, and I would love to hear what you guys have to say. feel free to give us a call. And we'll see what your thoughts are. The Michael Duke Show. Common sense, liberty-based, free-thinking radio. Back with your phone calls in a moment. Finishing up at the end of the hour with Willie Waffle, wafflemovies.com. Your phone calls and more will return right here. Common sense, liberty-based, free-thinking radio.
If you missed the show, you can listen to it on your time with Dukes On Demand. Oh, and it's free. Like America used to be. Streaming live every weekday morning on Facebook Live and MichaelDukesShow.com.
Okay, we're in the break right now. We got some lines on hold. Holy cow, we got all 4 lines on hold. So let me go to them first, and let me get names so that we can take those calls when we get back. And we'll do that first things first here. So let's go over to the phone. Good morning. Who's this, and where are you calling from?
Good morning. This is Terry calling from Wasilla.
Terry in Wasilla. Hold the line, my dear. You will be first up on the queue when we return to the radio. Let's go over here to this next second call. Line 2. Good morning. Who's this? Where are you calling from?
This is Catfish from Kenai.
Catfish from Kenai. All right, Catfish, hold the line. You'll be number 2 in the queue. We go over here. Good morning. You're number 3. Who's this?
Michelle from Sterling on the peninsula.
Michelle from Sterling. All right, you're Sterling Michelle. You hold the line. You're number 3 in the tree. Number 4, let's go over here. Good morning. Who's this? Where are you calling from?
Carlene in Kodiak.
All right, Carlene, hold the line, my dear, and we will be back to you here in just a hot minute. You'll be number 4 at the end of the line, but we'll do our best to get to you here before we go forward. Thank you so much. Appreciate it. All right. It's utterly baffling to me that there are no legally required inspected certifications involved to being an armorer on a movie set. He says, I've got to jump through 8 layers of government code and regulations just to install a light in a house. You're not wrong. I mean, I'm not one to call for more government regulation, but you'd think it's something like that. They would self-regulate themselves. They would have their own, the NRA's got certified instructors, right? I mean, you'd think that they would have their own certification systems for those kind of things, and that a movie would require, even if it's a union certification, you'd think that they would require that at least for a movie involving guns, that even if you had no other union employees on the set, you would at least have somebody there who has that certification. Not just because her daddy has the certification and her daddy's that. And I know Bill keeps saying you keep going on and on about that, but trust me, if you saw these TikTok videos, you would be like, what? You're what? And you handle guns for a living? And trust that, and I understand people can be silly and everything else, but it just seemed like there was a level of immaturity there that I was not comfortable with. Let me just put it that way. Let me just put it that way. All right. Let's see. My chat module crashed, so I missed some stuff. You think that the insurance liability alone would mandate some form of certification on a movie set? I would not disagree with that. If the accident happened during the shooting of a scene and the armorer handed him the gun, or if they were playing around between scenes, would still be the deciding factor if Alec Baldwin was to blame. Was he supposed to be pointing the gun at the woman who was killed as part of the filming? I don't know. I would think that maybe, because, again, she's the director of photography, which means she's behind the camera, and so is the director. Was this a shot that was like one of those slow-mo flames blossom from the muzzle of the gun? We don't know. This is all speculation. But I would assume that if he's pointing it towards the camera and she's behind the camera, that's probably a pretty good way for that to go on. It would be interesting to see if there was any tampering related to an upset union worker that left the set. Sometimes they have been known to get vindictive when replaced by non-union workers. And Brian just sent me an email about the Clintons being involved in the thing. I'll look to see. Okay, we are about 45 seconds out right now. Let me go back to the chat room. Should age be judged? That was the way we had talked about that. Probably gets a tidy honorarium. I am a well-known electrician and heating guy here in Fairbanks. I don't recommend you let my daughter work on your boiler or rewire your panel. Exactly. You know? The problem with your theory is the harness is put on your body and you witnessed it happening, says Paul. Well, I mean, I could use it a bunch of different ones. That was the one that was presented, and it made sense to me, Paul. I mean, I'm not going to let my hatred for Alec Baldwin, fall into that category. All right, here we go. Jumping back into it, the Michael Duke Show, Common Sense Radio. All right, let's continue on. Discussions now. All four lines on hold, and we're going to start off with Terry in Wasilla. Going to get her take on what she thinks about what we've been chatting about. Terry, thanks for holding. What's on your mind?
Well, the way I was raised was if you pick a gun up and point it at someone, it's with the intention you're going to shoot them.
Right.
And I was been raised around guns my whole life. My children were, my granddaughters are. And if you point a gun at a person, it's with the intention you're going to kill them. And to me, that's the fifth rule of handling a gun. You don't pick it up and point it at someone unless you intend to shoot them.
Right.
So.
Well, but I mean, can we agree? Can we agree here, Terry, that that there is an exception for, again, movies and television and they are making believe. They are literally creating fiction that we demand be as realistic as possible. And there are plenty of instances. I mean, you've watched plenty of TV shows or procedurals where they're pointing guns at people, at their heads, across their bodies, out a window. It does happen. It doesn't mean it's not it's not real. And so there is an exception to that rule in that regard, which is why having a proficient armorer is so important.
I agree with that totally. And from what I've read from the Alec Baldwin case is they weren't shooting. He just arbitrarily picked the gun up and pointed it and pulled the trigger. And I could be completely wrong on that because I know a lot of new evidence has come out.
Right.
But in my world, you pick a gun up and point it at someone, and it's with the intentions to shoot them.
Right.
So that was just all I had on the thing, Michael. I appreciate you listening to me.
I appreciate you calling in. And I will say this, if that was the case, and I haven't heard anything yes or no, if it was in a scene or if it was outside of a scene, but if it was a thing where he just arbitrarily picked the gun up off the table and shot was not in a scene and was just like, trying to make a point and click, 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 I'm going to shoot you with this gun, then he's got a lot more liability than I was talking about before. If it was in a scene and it was specifically the armorer had handed him the gun, then in that case, I would think that he had a lot more liability and would be a lot, because again, he was doing it out of anger, or out of emotion instead of out of he's acting kind of thing. So I would agree with you on that, Terry. But maybe the truth will come out one of these days. We'll have to see. Maybe, who knows? Maybe the camera was rolling. That would have been, tragic. Catfish is down in the Kenai. He's going to sound off this morning. What's on your mind, sir?
Morning, sir. First-time caller, long-time listener.
Well, thank you.
I just wanted to chime in. I agree with a lot of the talking points that you pointed out. I think there's a lot of attributing factors here that essentially bred a culture of complacency. When you look at it, they were plinking on site using real rounds. I mean, it's just it's a breakdown in safety,
right.
And I think that all leads back to the lead armorer, irrespective of her age. I think that's an attributing factor, and you made some great points, right? I mean, we all have a social media footprint that everybody gets a perception from us, right?
Right.
And it's a significant breakdown
right.
in the culture. The thing that I keep struggling with is why an armorer would allow, for real rounds, as I've read in articles, they allowed for plinking on site when people were, quote unquote bored. And so, I mean, that's just a significant breakdown in the culture that they bred out there. And, I think you're right. Ultimately, Alec Baldwin is going to be, held accountable in some respect. I can't see why they would allow real rounds, on a movie set. And when you think of and of all places where somebody got wounded or murdered and killed in this instance, think of all the movies where you have, massive amounts of rounds being fired.
Right.
Go back and look at like Salt, where she's like, she's unloading mag after mag,
right,
trying to get into the into that scene, right? I mean,
all I could think about this was the Matrix lobby scene in the first Matrix, where there's 15 people with fully automatic weapons, firing at each other all over the place. It's all I could think of was, man, so many things could possibly go wrong there. That's what I thought about. Not a single round, but you've got, machine guns and pistols and shotguns and everything else going off all at the same time. It's pretty crazy for sure. But I agree with you. I think that it's kind of this ambivalence or this disdain for firearms and for firearm safety. But they're okay to use them to make a living, but they're going to chastise everybody else. But we can use them because we know better, kind of thing.
Exactly. No, exactly. So, and if I could just leave with one thing, I just want to say great job on keep hammering the failures of Peter Machicki. Keep hammering that away. Appreciate all your talking points on that every week.
I don't know how hard I have to hit on that. I think the people of the peninsula are starting to see it for themselves. I don't think I need to hit it too much harder at this point. But thank you, Catfish, for calling in. I appreciate you sounding off. That leaves 2 lines open. Let's go over to Michelle. She's also down on the peninsula in Sterling. Michelle, whoops, let me not drop your call. Let me take your call. Good morning, Michelle. What's on your mind?
Good morning. So I am, I guess, always a skeptic. Maybe that's not the right word, but somebody already touched on this in the chat during the break. But do you think at all that this could have been a retaliatory effort of some kind by some disgruntled union employees? Like, that's the first place my brain went.
Right. Well, that was a question that was in the chat room. Somebody said, "Do you think that I'm scrolling back for it here to get it so I can read it exactly." But basically asking, do you think that it could have been the fact that the disgruntled union employees who left the set may have left it as a surprise because they've been known, union employees have been known to be vindictive in that way? I guess anything's possible. Anything could be possible, but from what I understand, that it was a day or two before that this happened. So I just don't know. There's too many questions there. That would be a pretty crappy thing to do at that point. I mean, really, if you want to, go ahead.
It could have gone wrong. I guess it could have been, intended to be something smaller that just went awry.
Right.
But it definitely. I mean, if they're trying to build a case about, an unsafe set, that definitely would have proved their point.
Yeah, no, that's true. That is true. Although with tragic consequences, I think you'd have to be in a pretty dark place to be there. But maybe, again, we have no way of knowing at this point. More, everything else that we're talking about now is speculation at this point, but all these details may come out as we go through here, and we'll find out more as we go forward. Thank you, Michelle, for calling in this morning and talking with us. It was Henry who asked the question. He said, it will be interesting to see if there was any tampering related to an upset union worker that left the set. Sometimes they have been known to get vindictive when being replaced by non-union workers. That's pretty vindictive, when it's all said and done. That's I don't know. But Anthony does make a valid point. He says, let's clear the disgruntled employee theory and put it to rest. Ultimately, the armorer failed to properly clear and check the firearms prior to handing them to untrained actors for a scene. I think, again, I agree with Anthony. I think ultimately this is going to be laid at the feet of the armorer. Again, if it's all in a scene. If it's not in a scene, then Baldwin's going to have a lot more culpability in this. Carlene's in Kodiak. Carlene, what's on your mind?
Well, I've been watching John Wayne movies this week, and especially the special features. The director, Arthur McLachlan, It's just so good. But what comes to mind is the people walking off the set because it was unsafe. That it would seem like the director and the producer are supposed to maintain that, and these other people, they should. I don't know. It just feels like the director and the producer.
Yeah, I mean they
ultimately.
They ultimately are responsible for the safety of the set. The director and the producers, the executive producers especially, are ultimately, they're responsible for maintaining the set in that way. And you're right. And if this walk-off, and they didn't say what the safety violations were. Were they, on the horseback? Were they firearms? Were they something else? We don't know. There's a lot of speculation going on, but we'll keep that in mind, Carlene. Thank you for calling in. I got time for one more call. Good morning. Who's this? Where are you calling from?
Hi, this is Jason calling from Fairbanks.
Hey, Jason, I got about a minute here. What's on your mind?
Well, just two things very quickly. One, when you were talking about the reactions of some of the folks in the gun culture, having a feeling of, we got our backs on that one. C.S. Lewis warned to never think that way, because that's the first step in the process of becoming devils ourselves. That to want to see black as a little blacker, we ought to, Mr. Baldwin could actually commit suicide over this, because apparently he knows that ultimately he's responsible for having pulled that trigger.
Right.
And secondly, there's even more laxity of gun use on sets than known, like the Civil War movie, The Colt. Some of the bonus footage I watched, it showed the actors, older teenagers wearing their Confederate uniforms, pointing their guns at each other and pulling the trigger repeatedly, like it was a great fun.
Right.
And I thought,
right.
Thank God nobody killed themselves just there.
Well, exactly. No, we've got to hold those rules above and apart. That's for sure. We've got to keep them in mind, even on movie sets. I appreciate it, Jason. Thank you so much. We're out of time. We got more coming up. Willie Waffle up next.
Streaming live every weekday morning, 6 to 9 a.m. on Facebook Live and MichaelDukesShow.com.
And there's the inherent problem, says Anthony. The director-producer was Alec Baldwin, who failed to do anything about the unsafe working environment due to an inexperienced armorer and loose firearm safety. Well, I mean, he's the producer. He's not the director. The director was one of the people that got shot, but he is the executive producer. He's the driving force behind the movie. It was his project, his baby, he's definitely going to have culpability, whether as the producer or whether as the guy who actually pulled the trigger, if it was outside of a scene and he was trying to make some kind of bravado point. It's definitely going to be a problem. Chris says, someone slipped live rounds in a gun where no live rounds are permitted on the set. Well, that was the thing, Chris, we were talking about. It was being reported that they were using these guns to target practice in their off hours or in the evenings or whenever. So there was live rounds on the set to begin with, which is a major, major no-no. I read from the Warner Brothers safety on the set thing earlier that no live. I mean, it says right here, no live ammunition is not to be brought onto a studio lot, stage, or location. So if they're out there plinking with the guns that they're using for the movie in their off time or in the evenings, they have violated that by bringing live ammunition onto the location, which again is the responsibility of the armorer. So, I think what's going to happen, this is my prediction, and as like I said earlier, my prediction is that they are going to that the armorer will be held responsible for not properly clearing the guns and doing the right thing. But ultimately, it will be probably Alec Baldwin who will bear a big part of the responsibility, because he had a non-union crew with a young and inexperienced armorer. I don't know what other movies that she has. Let me see. I should have done this beforehand. Let me Google her on IMDb and see if she has oh, wait a second. There's a 5 minutes ago, a news story broke out. A news story broke out here. about 5 minutes ago from Yahoo News. It says, Rust armor Hannah Gutierrez-Reed breaks her silence, blames producer for unset safe. She oversaw the props used in the Rust movie, shared her side of the story for the first time about the fatal shooting when he was rehearsing what he was told by Halls was a cold or safe gun. Previously, blah, 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 blah. Let's see. Some of the untruths, statement addresses some of the untruths told by the media. Safety is Hannah's number one priority. Ultimately, this set would never have been compromised if live ammo were not introduced. She has no idea where the live rounds came from. It continued that Hannah and the prop master, previously identified as Sarah Zachary, gained control over the guns, and she never witnessed anyone shoot live rounds with those guns, nor would she permit that. The guns were locked up every night and at lunch, and there was no way a single one of them was accounted for or being shot by crew members. So maybe that story must be false. Maybe false. Gutierrez seemingly confirmed reports there were 2 accidental discharges prior to Baldwin, who was rehearsing the scene with what he was told was a cold gun. Hannah, to this day, the statement said, has never had an accidental discharge. The first one on the set was with the prop master, and the second was a stuntman after Hannah informed him that the gun was hot with blanks. Gutierrez claimed that the independent film set was unsafe, but it was not because of her. She was hired on 2 positions in this film, which made it extremely difficult to focus on her job as armorer. She fought for training, days to maintain weapons, and proper time to prepare for gunfire, but ultimately was overruled by production in her department. The whole production set became unsafe due to various factors, including lack of safety meetings. This was not the fault of Hannah. How live ammunition got onto the set of the Bonanza Creek Ranch is at the center of the investigation. So they're trying to figure out, and so are Gutierrez Reed and Sarah Halls, the 2 people who were supposed to check any weapons before giving them to an actor. Wow. There should not be live ammunition on the movie set, the sheriff said, but it was a live bullet that fatally shot Hutchins before landing in director Joel Souza's shoulder. Investigators took into evidence from the set some 500 rounds, including lives, blanks, and dummy bullets. Wow. Okay. Lives, blanks, and dummy bullets. All of them. Okay. So, we'll see. All right. Well, that wraps up that. It's an interesting debate. We're going to get more information on this. We're going to get more information on this as we go forward, and we will learn more as we go. All right, my friends, phone lines are ringing. We are ready for it. Willie Waffle's coming up next. We might talk about this with him as well, and we'll get the weekend movie reviews. It is The Michael Duke Show, broadcasting live across the state of Alaska. Like and share this video. Would you do that? Like and share? Common sense, liberty-based, free thinking radio. All righty then. Final segment of the show today. The weekend. Oh, I can feel it. Are we working for the weekend there, lover boy? Are we working for the weekend? Is that what we're doing? I mean, isn't everybody doing that, Willie Waffle?
I'm working for the weekend, and sometimes I like to be called lover boy.
I know. I figured you'd like that. I mean, I'm just trying to build your confidence up at this point, so it's all okay. Weekend movie reviews, entertainment news, all that other kind of stuff. So first things first, there's really nothing at the box office right now, right? We had Dune, we had Bond, we had the Marvel stuff. I mean, so there's nothing right this moment. A little bit of a boring week overall.
Yeah, I mean, a couple movies, and we'll talk about them. I mean, this Antlers movie, this horror movie, Antlers, is kind of interesting.
Okay.
You know, it's. You want me to go into that? Or you want to talk news first?
Let's just talk news first before we.
Okay.
Let's keep the format the way we've had it, I guess.
I don't want to mess with the clock, man.
I know, really, don't mess with the clock. All right, so Barbie, the movie. What?
I know. This could be brilliant. Okay, so it is the Barbie movie. It is written by Greta Gerwig. If you're familiar with her, she's the woman who wrote and directed Lady Bird, which is one of the really good movies. If you've never seen it, with Saoirse Ronan and Jackie Metcalf, I mean, really good movie. But this is the Barbie movie. A little bit of probably a send up of Barbie, but we do know who's playing Barbie, and we know who's playing Ken. And playing Barbie will be none other than Margot Robbie.
Okay, Margot. I mean, that's good. Some good acting chops there. No problem there. Okay, Margot Robbie. How about Ken?
Mr. Ryan Gosling. Okay. The perfect Ken.
He's the perfect Ken. He's pretty much Ken. I mean, it was him or Chris Evans, and Chris Evans was busy, I guess. I mean, what's the plot here? It's Barbie and Ken. Willie, what the heck? I mean, what are we?
Yeah, and there's not much known about the plot right now. I mean, the idea is probably like, their crazy, unconventional love story and how difficult it is to be, dolls that are not anatomically correct.
There's a whole movie right in there. I mean, there's loads of therapy built into that movie right there, just at that point. All right, so that's coming. Something to look forward to. I mean, if you really want to. The Jonas Brothers, they're getting roasted. I mean, a lot of people, probably my listeners, probably don't know who the Jonas Brothers are because it's probably 45 plus in this audience, and that's probably way out of their demo. But tell us what's going on.
Well, they're going to have a very, very special roast on Netflix. It's going to be hosted by Kenan Thompson from Saturday Night Live, and it's featuring comedians and celebrities in like comedy sketches and songs and, a traditional roast. Just, kind of making fun of the Jonas Brothers, and it will debut on November 23rd. And, there are some interesting guests here. There are interesting roasters, as they say.
Okay.
Pete Davidson from Saturday Night Live.
All right.
How about John Legend? That could be interesting.
Okay. All right.
And my buddy Gabriel Fluffy Iglesias.
Okay. I mean, I knew about half of those people, so that's okay. I mean, Jonas Brothers. Willie's got to bring the stuff in here that makes me immediately feel old. I mean, the Jonas Brothers, my daughters listen to the Jonas Brothers, and I'm like, okay. All right, well, we'll be looking at that Netflix so that I don't click on that at all. That'll be fine. You said you had some John Wick news. Tell me the John Wick news.
This is a really cool story. So, they've been making the John Wick 4 movie with Keanu Reeves, and he's got a set of like 4 guys that are like the stunt team for him in the John Wick movies.
Mm-hmm.
And, he's a pretty decent guy.
Oh, yeah.
He's a likable guy.
Well, he's a heck of a guy, yeah.
To celebrate the end or the wrap of the shooting, he took the gentlemen out to dinner, and each one of them received a personally engraved Rolex Submariner watch.
Wow. That's not a bad gift. That's about a $15,000 gift. That's not a bad gift, I guess. So,
Yeah, man. I'd like to work for Keanu Reeves.
Yeah. Well, he gave up on, I think it was The Matrix 2 or 3. He gave up almost all of his points in the movie and paid all that money to the stunt team, because he felt like they were underappreciated and underpaid, and he paid, and the special effects team. It was something like $9 million. He spread it out amongst all those people and didn't take any money for one of the movies. I think it was the second or the third one. I mean, the guy gives you the coat off his back. He is quite a guy. He's really, I think he's a really awesome human being. So it's another reason why I like him so much. And that just sounds very John Wicky to me. Or Keanu Reevesy to me. So that's good. Joan Rivers, we talked about this, that they were going to do a Joan Rivers thing. Apparently, somebody forgot to ask permission on this.
Yeah, this really kills me. This shocks me. This is stupidity personified here, okay? So, yeah, I was excited about this. We talked about this a few weeks ago. They were going to make a Joan Rivers bio series starring Catherine Hahn, yes, Agatha, as Joan Rivers. And it was supposed to be kind of a look at the rough time she was having after career tragedy and personal tragedy. Her show ending on Fox, her career looking like it's over. Her husband, who was also her manager, committing suicide, and the show has been canceled by Showtime before they even started to make it because someone forgot to check and see who owned all the rights to Joan Rivers' life, including like her comedy and her jokes and all the trademarks that go along with her. You know, the things that would make it a Joan Rivers show.
Right, right.
And guess who owns all the rights?
I got to guess that it's probably her daughter, Melissa Rivers. She's pretty sharky. I imagine that she probably called a halt to that right away.
It totally is, and that's totally what happened.
Yeah.
They realized we are not going to be able to make a deal with Melissa.
Well, you might be able to make a deal, but you don't announce it and then go, we'd like to make a deal. You know what I mean? You might have want to check on that beforehand.
Yeah, that's kind of dumb. I'm sorry. That is really just not very bright.
Yeah. Well, it is what it is. Too bad. So sad. Bye-bye. We talked about it earlier today. We talked about it earlier this week as well. This situation with Alec Baldwin and the movie Rust. The shooting of the director of photography and the director. The director of photography died, of course. And there's been a lot of pushback in different ways. And I've read, and earlier today we on the show we read some commentary on why the 4 gun rules really shouldn't apply because it's not real life. But at the same time, I'm kind of torn back and forth. What are we finding out now? That in fact it was a real bullet. For somehow the gun had a bullet in it because they'd been plinking with it between scenes or something.
And earlier that day they had gone out target shooting with the guns from the movie.
Right, exactly.
I mean, that's just stupid.
And somehow a bullet, is it the armorer? Is it Alec Baldwin's fault? Is it, the prop master? Who? I don't know. I mean, the whole thing's a tragedy. It really is. And as much as I dislike Alec Baldwin, I can't necessarily go all in on him. I mean, if you handed me a gun, whether it was a prop or not, I'm going to check it just because that's who I am. That's how I was taught. That's my life. But I don't know, man. It's such a hard thing. And it's just devastating to everybody involved at this point.
Well, yeah, and there are levels to this thing that I think we're going to be examining for a long time. I mean, there's just a human level. I mean, it's a horrible, horrible tragedy. It sounds like the whole movie set was a little bit out of control, to be honest with you.
Right.
We heard that a lot of the union people walked off the set that day. They felt it wasn't a safe set. They didn't think safety measures were properly being followed. Now we're hearing the story that a whole bunch of people went out, target shooting with the guns from the movies with real ammo.
Right.
Not the brightest of things. We're hearing that the person that was in charge of handling all the guns was inexperienced, and basically it sounds like she kind of got the job because her father's a very famous armorer.
Right.
And they figured, well, some of it might rub off, or maybe she'll get some advice from him.
Exactly.
So that's not looking very good.
Yeah.
And here's where Alec Baldwin's going to have troubles. I mean, I don't think anybody's going to go after him for the fact that, he's supposed to have faith that crew is giving him something safe to use.
Right.
However,
he
is an executive producer on the movie.
Yeah.
He's a boss.
Yeah.
He's there to hire and to run the thing. And so he could be not serving, that's not the right word, but he could be looking at having some responsibility for the actions of the crew on the set.
Right. Liability. He could be facing some liability issues for sure. I mean, the movie's never going to get made now. I mean, it's going to be tied up in litigation for the rest of time. So that movie's...
Oh, no, it's done. It's done. Matter of fact, I question if Alec Baldwin will ever work again.
Yeah. Well, and it's really sad because Jensen Ackles is I really like him as an actor, and he played the marshal in that movie. And I'd seen something from him just 2 days before the shooting about how he'd been working with the armorer and talking about firearms and stuff like that. It was a really interesting piece. But, I mean, yeah. I mean, it's I mean, even with their tools, you got to be safe no matter what. I mean, I think you'll have a lot of actors that'll be double checking when they get handed something from now on going, are you sure? Are you really sure? Which may not be a bad thing.
No, that might not be a bad thing. And, I think it's a great idea. If I'm an actor on a set, I'm going to pull aside this armor. I'm going to say, I want you to tell me what to look for. I want you to tell me what I should check when that thing gets put in my hands, rather than putting blind faith in somebody else.
Yeah, no, but I mean, he has such disdain for firearms and for the firearms community in general, yet he makes his living, using those same tools. I mean, I'm not blaming him. I'm just saying the irony is deep on that. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
That he has such disdain for it that he doesn't really even understand a lot of the basics of that. So anyway, it's a tragedy, but I guess we'll see what comes of that. All right, down to about 3 minutes here. Couple movies, Last Night in Soho and Antlers. You wanted to talk about Antlers. I guess we'll start there to see if we have any time left when it's all said and done.
Yeah, and this was kind of set off in a remote coastal town in Oregon.
Right.
And Carrie Russell is this school teacher who returns to town. She left under bad circumstances, didn't have a good family life. Now she's returning. And her brother, Jesse Plemons, is kind of the local sheriff. And they start taking interest in this shy little kid at school who, well, he seems to be suffering from some sort of abuse. And as they start to investigate, it gets dirtier and scarier and bloodier and grosser as they start to find out what's going on around this kid and what could be causing all the danger in town.
And this is a horror flick, right? This is not just a suspenseful drama. This is a horror flick.
Yeah, this is a horror movie, people. This is made for Halloween. And I'm not kidding. When I say bloody and gross, ooh.
Well,
this ain't pretty.
You saw the Saw movies and said, so is it on that level of Eli Roth kind of gore porn kind of thing? Yeah.
Yes, but I think less exploitive, and in this case, really more a part of the story and where it's going and what is causing all of this mayhem. And I like that. I think there's at least something to it. I like how they have you kind of in this mysterious place where we're wondering, why is this kid making such weird, graphic, frightening drawings? And what's this weird stuff in his house? And why are there so many dead things out in the forest around his house?
Oh, Lord. Oh, Lord. Bad seed. So a good story then. Good actors, good story. Pretty up and up all the way through.
Yeah, except I think it gets a little woke. I don't know how else to say it. I don't want to give away everything, but there's almost like there's almost a theme of, this is what you get for industrializing the land kind of story.
Right.
I'm going to go 3 waffles for Antlers.
3 waffles. That's still a pretty high rating from you for that one for sure. All right.
Yeah.
We got just over a minute here. Last Night in Soho. I can guarantee you this is a movie I'd never watch. But apparently, young girl, London Soho, studying fashion. Give me the deal.
Yeah, so this has always been her dream to live in Soho, to be a fashion designer, because she always thinks of this romanticized version of 1960s Soho, kind of the Austin Powers Soho, if you will, of London. And as she gets this apartment, and when she goes to sleep at night, she starts having dreams where she's transported back to this time and is following this young lady played by Anya Taylor-Joy from The Queen's Gambit, and we're seeing that life wasn't as pretty as you might imagine. And now she's wrapped up in the mystery, hoping to find out what happens to this woman.
Okay. All right. Well, again, okay. All right. -1 to 4 waffles. Where are we at?
I'll go 2.5 waffles. I think it's a decent movie.
Last Night in Soho. Willie Waffle, wafflemovies.com. My friend, thank you for coming on board. Folks, we're out of time. We will see you on Monday. Be well, be kind, love one another. We'll see you then. All right, my friends, we're out of time. Willie's still with us. I got to tell you, Terry has been on this kick. She does this every Halloween. She wants to watch she's got a list of scary movies she wants to watch and everything. And this year we found some new ones, which I had never seen before, including, we watched the ones that you and I talked about before, the Michael Flanagan, of course, Michael Flanagan of The Haunting of Bly Manor and The Haunting of House Hill.
Oculus.
And Oculus. We watched Oculus. We watched Ouija. We watched a couple of, that's some dark, scary stuff for sure. But then we watched one that was a total twist. I loved it. It is definitely, again, it's rated R, folks, so don't let your kids watch this, but it was called Trick or Treat, and apparently it's several years old, and it's a staple amongst people who love Halloween movies. That movie has got so many cool twists and weird things that happen in it. It's a lot of fun. Your favorite Halloween movie, Willie? The scary movie that you love to watch every year?
I think right along those kind of themes of the twists and turns and surprises, it is a great movie. I don't know if you've ever seen it. It's called The Last Exorcism, and it's about this guy. He's a flim-flam man. He is doing exorcisms as a joke and a way to rip people off, except this time it's real.
Oh, man. I'll have to tell Terry about that one. If you haven't seen Trick or Treat, though, you should go watch that one. It's got the gal from True Blood who played Sookie Stackhouse. I can't remember her name. It's got her in it. There's a bunch of people in it. It is twist, and what I love is that it's got surprise twists to it that you're like, what? Oh, that's crazy. Good stuff. Good stuff. You'll have to go check it out. Willie Waffle, wafflemovies.com. Thank you, my friend.
Hey, you got it. I'll talk to you next week. There's a Tom Hanks movie out next week.
Ooh, baby. All right, well, we're excited about that. Folks, I really am out of time. I hope you have a great weekend. Come out and see me at the Shriner Classic game tomorrow at the Dome, 1 p.m. I'll be there. Thanks for coming out and joining us. The Michael Duke Show, Common Sense Radio.
We've shed our terrestrial radio skin, and now we are slimy lizard internet people. It's the Michael Duke Show.